with Ken Omar and Debbie Stodhart for this press conference. Yesterday, for the first time, the ASEAN Leaders Summit and related summits took place in the metaphorical empty chair, where a representative for Myanmar is supposed to sit. APHR, or the ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights, has been deeply encouraged by the ASEAN Foreign Minister's decision to exclude Myanmar's military chief from the ASEAN Summit. It was an unprecedented and a significant moment in ASEAN's development. And it also shows that ASEAN is serious about holding Senior General Min Aung Hlaing to the 5-point consensus reached in Jakarta in April this year. We recognize that this was an important step in the ASEAN context. However, much more needs to be done, and lots more need to be done to demonstrate ASEAN's seriousness, difficult as they may be to the bloc. When I say ASEAN's context, everyone understands that what that really means, given how little ASEAN has been able to define itself beyond anything but the lowest common denominator, also known as the principle of non-interference. Sometimes it's as if ASEAN is its own worst enemy. Make no mistake, the horrific nightmare that senior officer or Senior General Min Aung Hlaing is unleashing violence on his people is also an unprecedented opportunity for ASEAN leaders to move beyond their air-conditioned corridors of power, to help save lives, and bring peace, health, prosperity to our strategically important region. If saving people's lives isn't enough to convince them, then what about the credibility of the organization? ASEAN leaders know very well that it depends on its ability to act decisively and bring the Myanmar military junta to end its relentless campaign of violence, killing against the people of Myanmar. It's actually in ASEAN's best interest that it takes steps to make ASEAN centrality a reality through credible, decisive action to back up its own agreements, statutes, and charters. If not, its reason to exist, its very reason to exist is in peril, although it's not an exaggeration. My colleague Kin Omar of Progressive Voice will tell you much more about the hardship and extreme violence the junta is forcing on its people. Let me just say that according to the UN Interim Residence Coordinator in Myanmar, in the 8 months since the coup, half of the population is living below the poverty line. The number of people needing aid has tripled from 1 million to 3 million. As the Philippines Foreign Secretary Teodoro Locsin said recently, if ASEAN does not take a tough stand on Myanmar, it will be seen as a bunch of guys who always agree with each other on the worthless things. This is another moment when it's plain for everyone to see that the fate of ASEAN is intrinsically bound with the fate of its people, not its leaders, but its people, whether they like it or not. ASEAN must continue to press Myanmar's junta to concrete measures to progress a 5-point consensus. We would like to remind our extinguished journalists here that the 3 is still, there is no sign that the junta is willing to cooperate. There was an announcement, a very weak announcement released of thousands of prisoners immediately after ASEAN's announcement, but it simply wasn't true. Not only were far fewer prisoners released, but many were re-arrested. The military seems not only to have total contempt of the ASEAN Leaders Agreement, and ASEAN has continued to invite and welcome representatives of the Myanmar junta to lower-level meetings within ASEAN. So I go back to my point, much more needs to be done if ASEAN wants its own legitimacy as a key regional player that can bring peace and stability. As an outcome of this summit, APHR calls for ASEAN 1 to immediately meet officially and publicly with the representative of the National Unity Government and open dialogue. Number 2, stop inviting any other junta representative to ASEAN official meetings until there is an end to violence. All political prisoners must be free and restoration of democracy in the country. ASEAN members are not the only governments at the summit. We also have the dialogue partners involved in this summit that's happening right now. Dialogue partners also have a key role to play in supporting and pushing ASEAN to do what is necessary for the people of Myanmar and the region. As members of the international community, they have a role to play in the face of international crimes. So we urge government around the world and partners, dialogue partners, ASEAN's dialogue partners in particular, one, to continue to extend sanctions against military officials and their economic interests. They include oil, and that includes oil and gas, which is the junta's main source of revenue. Number two, officially meet with the NUG, National Unity Government, to extend solidarity for the people of Myanmar who have relentlessly supported democracy since the coup at the cost of their own lives and livelihoods. Number three, support international accountability mechanisms, including through the UN Security Council, other UN mechanisms, as well as through universal jurisdiction cases. And finally, I'd just like to say that there's only one place where Min Aung Hlaing should go next, and not the ASEAN's next meeting, but a court of justice. Now, a further point to be made is this, that is on the humanitarian assistance within ASEAN.
Charles,
Yeah.
Charles, I will ask about that a bit later.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed, Charles Santiago. Actually, there was a bit of a problem with your audio was crackling a bit. So what we can do is to offer to our participants your talking points a bit later, or with a draft transcript, something like that. But we thank you very much indeed for that, your speech, your initial address. Thank you, Charles Santiago.
Thank you very much.
Now, it's our very great honor and privilege to introduce to the world, in fact, the very newly appointed really ambassador or representative for the Myanmar National Unity Government to ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and that is U Bo La Tint. He joins us from the East Coast of the United States, and he's somebody who's been involved in kind of external relations for the pro-democracy movement of Burma for many years now. U Bo La Tint, I very broadly would like to ask you why ASEAN should be dealing with the National Unity Government, as Charles has just called for. He's just said that the world should now already be dealing with the NUG. We've seen that with a lot of different governments around the world, including the United States. I saw there was a note that I think it was the State Secretary who said that the National Security Advisor has been meeting with the NUG. The US National Security Advisor has been meeting with the NUG. So why is it?
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you, Veronica and the APH inviting me to be part of this panel. So, and first of all, I like to say that my appointment as an ambassador to the ASEAN by Foreign Ministry of the National Unity Government is, demonstrate that readiness of the National Unity Government and democracy movement of Myanmar to work with the ASEAN leadership as well as ASEAN community to find a viable solution, durable solution of the current political, humanitarian, and human rights crisis in our country. So, and thus ensure stability and peace in the region. So it is obvious that military junta in Myanmar failed to cooperate or to work with the ASEAN and international community, not only the ASEAN leadership, but also they denied the special envoy, not only from the ASEAN, but also from the United Nations. So the last 6 months has been furthermore, they've been tarnishing the face of ASEAN leadership under the 5-point consensus agreement. They continue their reign of terror and campaign of terror, as well as they didn't allow the visits of the special envoy to meet with the all concerned party. And At the same time, they are the root or cause of the totally collapsed, almost collapsed economy and health and education system in the country. So at the same time, they are not key for the ASEAN to consider whether they're going to work with the failed military junta who are not lack of support by the Myanmar majority population of Myanmar, and are they willing to work with the who are ready to work with the regional association honestly, at the same time legitimacy own national unity government of the Union of Myanmar or by the people of Myanmar. So it is obvious that we are ready to work with ASEAN and regional community as well as international community or ASEAN dialogue partner to ensure the regional stability as well as all these sustainable solution of the crisis, all the crisis we are facing in Myanmar today. That is a short answer to your question that why NUG should be in place of the military junta. So it is very obvious that the 2020 election provided the popular support and legitimacy to this NUG government. Only NUG has the legitimacy and vote by the people to work with the regional and international community, and itself speaking out and appointing me to work in depth with the ASEAN counterparts, so that I am very clearly want to say that we are ready to work with the ASEAN. We will not tarnish the integrity and legitimacy and credibility of ASEAN, but we will be very responsible counterpart in the region for the future, so that we want to be part of the ASEAN society, active member of the ASEAN in constructive way. But when we talk about the constructive mean, it is ASEAN and ourselves must be engaged with the people of Myanmar as well as people of Southeast Asia. Thank you for your question.
Thank you very much indeed, Ubo La Tint. I just want to ask participants, I'm sure that you have a lot of questions about what we're going to talk about today. So I would ask you to please write down your questions in the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen. And that's when we will, and then we will have questions after we've heard from our final speaker. Kin Omar, the founder of Progressive Voice, and before that of various other organizations, civil society organizations. She's really been a mainstay of the pro-democracy movement of Myanmar for so long. And it's great to have you here. Thank you very much indeed. Kin Omar, I know you've been working around the clock trying to push this junta out of their situation at the moment, and their strategy that apparently seems to be about total destruction of the country, given what Ubo La Tint has just said.
Thanks, Veronica. I just want to start saying that the Progressive Voice, we have joined the brave people of Myanmar's Spring Revolution and civil disobedience movement in welcoming the ASEAN's decision to exclude the junta from attending the summit. That's a huge step. But let me also share our view that we still disagree with the ASEAN for still inviting the junta's representative, regardless of whether political or non-political. As long as the chosen representative represents this terrorist military, we will continue to reject their presence at all ASEAN summits and other platforms, as anyone appointed by them do not represent the people of Myanmar. Besides, the ASEAN's decision of inviting a non-political representative is an attempt to depoliticize an issue that is absolutely deeply political. This decision also tells us that the ASEAN is still hesitating and indecisive in addressing our country's situation. This means further bloodshed for the people of Myanmar ahead. Myanmar people continue with their rejection of this regime, this junta. Peaceful protests continue every day. Civil disobedience movement, joined by more than 400,000 civil servants, remain strong. Even a few thousands of soldiers and police have already defected and joined the people. And yet, crisis has reached to the breaking point because the junta continues its campaign of terror across the country with no sign of stopping. There are mass killings, mass arrest, torture, rape, and also mass displacement, and many other forms of human rights violations and violence and atrocities are happening. As of October 26, the junta has killed at least 1,213 people. The actual number can be way higher. 9,223 people have been arrested, 7,025 remain under detention, according to Assistance Association for Political Prisoners. Conflict has intensified across the country that poses a grave threat not only to the economic stability, as this military junta has deliberately targeting civilians, breaching the Geneva Convention, and committing war crimes and crimes against humanity. Over 250,000 people have been forced to flee from the junta's attacks. Now, as the junta is preparing another wave of clearance operations called Anorata and Bayinnaung operations in Chin State and Zagai region, respectively, we will be seeing another wave of atrocities very soon. And these operations are a plan of a deliberate retaliation in forms of collective punishment against the people for rejecting and resisting the attempted coup by this military, which is failing. This junta has total disregard for human life. Unless they are held to account, Myanmar has no chance to move forward. The international community must step up to end this junta's campaign of terror and assist the national unity government in steering Myanmar towards genuine federal democracy, particularly the ASEAN. It should be very clear to ASEAN by now that the ASEAN alone cannot tackle the human rights and humanitarian crises that are unfolding in Myanmar. These crises have been created by this military, and thus partnering or working with the junta will bring only more harm to the people. It is crucial that the ASEAN work with the national unity government, the people representative democratically elected government of Myanmar, and seek out a UN coordinated response together in response to the crisis in order to end this bloody coup attempt and save the people of Myanmar. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kin Omar of Progressive Voice, speaking there. We have had a few questions here in our Q&A box. A reminder that our participants can put their questions there, and we'll put them to our panelists in turn. We're also joined, I want to say, by Debbie Stottard of ASEAN Burma, and she can assist with answering questions. Great to have you here, Debbie. Actually, the first two questions are quite similar. So if I'd like to read them out. One, we don't have an answer, we don't have a proper name for that person, but it's very similar to the next one. Ko Nang from CRPH NUG Support Group Australia wants to know why ASEAN invited a non-political representative to the ASEAN meeting, that the ASEAN consultation clearly states that the representative should be elected by the people. And that's the leader who should attend the ASEAN meeting. NUG ministers are the Myanmar people elected, and they should be attending ASEAN meeting. What is ASEAN's next steps to pressure on the junta? So I'd like to put that question. I think probably Charles, Ubo, Omar, and Debbie can have a go at answering that questions. Ubo, maybe first of all you, or Charles first of all?
Yeah. I give you a chance the first respond for that question, the regional perspective.
Is that okay, Charles? Yes.
I think our position, or the APHR position, was we should, and from day one, we were quite clear that Min Aung Hlaing orchestrated a coup d'etat against a civilian government. This government was elected by the people of Myanmar in their elections in 2020, and ASEAN has got no business legitimizing Min Aung Hlaing. That was our position from day one. But unfortunately, ASEAN sees it quite differently. And ASEAN, in fact, we also recommended at that time that the NUG be invited for the ASEAN meetings in April and to be part of the discussion that took place, that came up with the 5-point charter. But unfortunately, that did not happen. What happened was Min Aung Hlaing was present, and I think, and clearly he was part of the process determining the 5-point process. And clearly now he has gone back against it. And I think in some very funny way, one can say that ASEAN has finally been exposed. Finally, has been exposed that one of its own leaders is a crook. It's a guy who was there, who said and discussed the way forward, but was never committed to following through with the 5-point process. So it's a wake-up call for ASEAN that it has to go back to the ASEAN Charter and be committed to the ASEAN Charter and not to play politics, especially those groups that seem to be supporting Myanmar within ASEAN itself. ASEAN Charter is very clear. It's about rule of law, it's human rights, promoting democracy, protecting human rights and promoting human rights and good governance. And all of this was thrown in the basket in April. But now ASEAN has to wake up and realize that they were taken for a total ride by Military General Min Aung Hlaing. And I think this is exposed ASEAN in a very big way.
Thanks very much, Charles. Actually, Debbie, because you've had so much exposure to ASEAN and the way that ASEAN works, perhaps you'd like to answer this briefly as well before we go to Ubor, because there are quite a lot of questions for Ubor in the chat, in the Q&A box.
I feel like am I the ASEAN grandmother in the room? Because we've been working on human rights in ASEAN for more than 30 years. Anyway, this reminds me of the whole fight to stop Burma from chairing ASEAN back in 2006. In fact, that was the impetus that led to the formation of ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights, at that time known as ASEAN Interparliamentary Caucus for Democracy in Myanmar. It was formed in 2004 and to spearhead the campaign to prevent Burma from chairing ASEAN. At that time, it was the regime under the command of Senior General Tan Sri. And also at that time, it became very clear in ASEAN, there were certain member countries such as Indonesia and Malaysia who felt very reluctant to allow Burma to chair ASEAN, but also there were active dialogue partners such as the US who cooperated in Malaysia and Indonesia's campaign and the ASEAN MPs campaign, because Condoleezza Rice at that time said, "I'm not going to any ASEAN summits in Yangon." And so that really also was one of the factors, along with a whole range of other factors and pressures, that compelled a kind of ASEAN to allow a face-saving measure for the junta to withdraw from chairing ASEAN under the guise of being busy with its constitution drafting process. So I think here we also see that Malaysia and Indonesia had a role, and also that ASEAN was under so much pressure because the junta failed to cooperate on some very basic elements of the 5-point consensus. We actually saw that after the 5-point consensus was adopted, there was a 27% rise in military attacks and violence on civilians. And the core demand of the core point of the 5-point consensus was a cessation of violence. So it's very clear to us now that ASEAN has said, okay, this is too difficult. We won't let General Min Aung Hlaing in the room, but we have to make sure that this is not the only point, because this is the problem. In those days when Burma withdrew from the chair and ASEAN said, okay, finish. We don't have to push the reform agenda. That problem is off our plate. So now we need to make sure that the responsible individual ASEAN states partner with ASEAN dialogue partners and the UN Security Council to push this further, so that it's not an issue of just getting rid of a inconvenient problem for ASEAN. It's an issue of making sure there's a restoration of democracy and peace.
Thank you very much. Ubo, would you like to answer the question, please, about ASEAN? What do you think ASEAN next steps should be?
Well, ASEAN, if we expected ASEAN to be real regional association who concretely decisive, provided the concrete decisive leadership, not in the manner of existing way. At the same time, when they want to make sure that, for example, like ASEAN humanitarian mechanism is not ready for the man-made disaster crisis in Myanmar today. They are just for the natural disaster to be able to tackle natural disaster in the region. So that if ASEAN itself to be able to implement its 5-point consensus, ASEAN really need to admit that the whole region itself before they tackle the problem in Burma. At the same time, they cannot work it alone, and they really need to work with the United Nations and NUG and other dialogue partners to ensure that the effective and principled delivery of the humanitarian aid is reaching to the needy people and conflict-affected population and vulnerable population in Myanmar itself need to address the reform its need to able to work it out what they decided on the April 24 5-point consensus before they talk with or getting into the country. Do they have readiness to be able to deliver the much needed or urgently needed humanitarian assistance to the suffering people in Myanmar? So that at the same time, how can they avoid it participation of the military junta, who are the root of the cause and all these crises in Myanmar today? So how they can avoid it participation in decision making or delivering the needy humanitarian assistance that has been manipulated in the past. We have well recorded about the military nature of the, using the international humanitarian aid for their own benefit, not for the population really needed. So that my answer to that question is that it is time for ASEAN leadership to ready to become a very decisive association in decision-making process, and they have to just not taking out or making vacancy of the Myanmar seat, but also they have to be really able regional association in order to tackle not only the problems in Myanmar, but also in the future, wherever the whole region can happen, all these kind of man-made disaster have to be, able to protect and ensure given the needed answer by the ASEAN. So that we want ASEAN leadership to prove that from this summit, not only the vacancy, the seat of Myanmar, but also they take further concrete steps to become a real regional association that will be able to cover all the issues we are facing, challenges in Myanmar and other country of the member nation.
Okay, we have a question from
Veronica, can I come in this?
Yes.
Can I come into this? I think this meeting is important for many reasons. One of the reasons why it is important is because now you will have Cambodia chairing ASEAN beginning 2022, which means that in the context of Myanmar, we will have a new special envoy, and that envoy would come from Myanmar, from Cambodia. So the Foreign Ministry of Cambodia would now nominate somebody to become the special envoy for Myanmar. I think what we need to emphasize is we cannot have a repeat of the Brunei experience or the Brunei Special Envoy's experience vis-a-vis Myanmar. So, for example, one where he went the first trip to Myanmar and he said, yes, ASEAN will support the elections in 2023 and ASEAN will bring the election monitors to do that. We do not want that to happen. Number two, we also do not want a situation whereby the Special Envoy will not be able to meet the different stakeholders, including political leaders, as part of the political process. So therefore, it is incumbent upon ASEAN leaders at this meeting to be decisive, to be absolutely decisive in the way forward and articulate a clear way forward, so that by end of next year or mid next year, we really have a constructive process or development in achieving the 5-point plan. Otherwise, this will be another talk show. So I think ASEAN leaders have really to buck up, and I think they have to clearly outline what is the mandate, what is the responsibility, what is the scope of the special envoy, and within that to put clear outcomes that he has to meet by April, by May, by June. Otherwise, again, we will have the same meeting next year, and we will have achieved nothing. So therefore, this meeting is very crucial in that sense. Cambodia is seen as as a country quite sympathetic with Min Aung Hlaing. And therefore, having a special envoy from the country could also mean he or she would be sympathetic as well. But therefore, ASEAN needs to leverage, ASEAN leaders need to leverage their position and outline a clear plan of action and a clear set of outcomes that they want to be seen by March, April, May, and so on and so forth. So 6 months, there must be some kind of within the first 4 months, there must be a clear outcome, and where the special envoy can report, yes, I met so and so, and this is the outcome, this is the way forward, and this is what I have done. Otherwise, Veronica, unfortunately, we will have a similar situation as Brunei. Nothing much would have happened, though. So therefore, I mean, we want to move ASEAN from no action talk only for doing something real action on the ground vis-a-vis Myanmar.
Yes, thank you very much, Charles. And I think that the summit is particularly empowered under the Charter to make such decisions and responses. And I think that was something that was written about quite recently by Adelina Kamal, I believe her name is, from the former head of the ASEAN Humanitarian Assistance Center, when she was saying it's up to the summit to make that point. And that was from a humanitarian angle only. Now, we have questions from Hui Tan. Hello, how are you? From the Straits Times, and her questions are for Ubola Tint. How has ASEAN engaged the NUG so far, is her question. And actually, that's the same question as Nyen Nyen from the Irrawaddy News. What do you expect most from this current ASEAN summit regarding Myanmar crisis? And are you in contact with the ASEAN leaders? Could you share about any upcoming talk?
Well, the first part of my answer, the first part of the question is how we engaging up to now with the ASEAN leadership. On the 23rd of October, our Foreign Minister, Dosema Aung, sent a letter to the ASEAN rotating chairman, the Brunei leadership, as well as ASEAN Secretariat, that the readiness of the National Unity Government to work with the ASEAN leadership as well as ASEAN community. In that sense, as a legitimate government of Myanmar, they appointed me as an ambassador to ASEAN, and they expected fully facilitating as a legitimate representative of the legitimate government of Myanmar people. They already sent out this letter to the Secretariat as well as Secretary General of the ASEAN Secretariat, as well as the rotating chairman of the ASEAN at this point. But we didn't receive any formal or informal response up to now. This is very, very frustrating for the NUG as well as for us. Second point is that what we expect from this summit I totally agree with that point Charles made before me, so that ASEAN need to be very decisive. That existing decision-making process, existing humanitarian wing, the way it is formed or readiness of these, all these kind of needy area has to be seriously reviewed and must be able to, transform into the real applicable structures or mandated. Without the clear mandate of the ASEAN leadership and the wing of the ASEAN, particularly, not only particularly in Myanmar, but also in the future conflicted area, will not be able to bring up the desired result, what expected by the people of Myanmar. So that, in short, is we want ASEAN leadership using this opportunity and this summit to change their style of, taking too long to make an important decision. But this is the condition on the ground and situation in Myanmar. It's challenging them if they continue as it is status quo, or if they want to be a real effective regional association at this moment. So we, on behalf of the Myanmar people, we expected ASEAN leadership to be decisive and which way they're going to choose. Whether they're going to work with the failed military coup leaders or legitimately elected representatives of Myanmar people. That is what we expected. We fully understand that based on the nature of ASEAN, it will take certain time, but it will not unlimited or endless time. We expected ASEAN leadership realize that they also in the pivotal role of ASEAN international attention, so that they cannot respond back to their dialogue partner who are endorsing them as a pivotal role to play to find a stated way of ASEAN. The 5-point consensus plan of ASEAN cannot be implemented as it is. So we want the ASEAN leadership seriously see that point, clearly see that point, and this summit must be not end of the process, but very beginning of the process, but very indecisive way. We don't expect it. The ASEAN leadership, on behalf of the ASEAN society, they must be very decisive which way they want to go ahead.
Thank you very much, Ubola Tint. I'm just going to give you a little break, but I do want you to answer the next question I'm going to ask after we've heard from Kin Omar, because Omar, I think this is a question that I know that you can answer as well. It's again from Tan Wei Yi of Straits Times. The US State Department counselor, Derek Chollet, mentioned recently that the US continues to encourage the NUG to unify the pro-democracy movement. To what extent has NUG done that within Myanmar? I know that you are on the NUCC, the National Unity Consultative Committee. Can you speak to that, please, Omar?
Thank you. Before that, I just want to clarify, I'm not on the NUCC, but I'm actually in the joint committee of the NUCC and the NUG on the UN credential issue.
Oh, my apologies.
Just clarification.
Yeah.
But what has NUG done for unifying? First is it is starting with the Spring Revolution. The people actually come to unify. They have come to join hands in solidarity across board. Those ethnic communities who actually experience or who have suffered for so long of the military's atrocities and violence and abuses for generations, now joined by the majority Burma population who never experienced the armed conflict or such level of the atrocities from that military. So now there's people's solidarity in Myanmar has been strongest ever that we have seen and experienced. In that Spring Revolution, the National Unity Government, of course, as the people elected government, plays the frontline major central role, where they are working together also with the ethnic armed organizations who've been, fighting for the federal democracy for a long time, for the ethnic equality, self-determination. Now the ethnic armed organizations leaders are now together, working together with the NUG towards establishing the genuine federal democracy. So that vision for future Burma, future Myanmar, that is to guarantee the equality for all the communities, regardless of their ethnic and religions. And this is the vision that has been set from the Spring Revolution, pass it on to the National Unity Government, pass it on to the National Unity Consultative Council, which is more of a broader and inclusive political body that will, lay the direction and the policy of the Spring Revolution and the movement together with the National Unity Government. So I think it's what we have is this most promising prospect of Myanmar, which the ASEAN leaders really need to embrace. They need to actually learn and really come to understand, the dynamics and the aspirations of Myanmar people from all corners of the country in the last 9 months, that people are not going to turn back or go back to the status quo before the military coup, which was the last 10 years, sort of like a power sharing between the military and the civilian, democratically elected civilian leadership. But that's not what the Myanmar people want anymore. They're done. They're completely done with this military, who is nothing more than a criminal gang and terrorist organization. So basically, everybody is moving forward, which is the genuine federal democratic union. And National Unity Government has brought these different forces to be able to work together. In fact, if you look at like the National Unity Government, the composition of the National Unity Government is already that unity. It represents that unity, presents that aspiration, because we have the elected representative from 2020 elections. We have the representatives from the different ethnic communities, also the representatives from the different general strikes and civil disobedience movement of the Spring Revolution and civil society. So this is the first time ever of the most inclusive, government that Myanmar people are having. So yeah, I really hope that ASEAN leaders take the stock in this very historical moment of our country and help Myanmar become a real, a viable, effective and responsible partner in this regional bloc, then move forward with the ASEAN vision of community building. That's what they have planned and set out with starting with the ASEAN Charter. And Myanmar has been the Myanmar military has always been the problem child for the ASEAN. They must do something about it now, because otherwise all the spillover effects is also on the impacting the ASEAN's vision and mission. Yeah. So I think it is not the internal affairs of the Myanmar people. It is actually in the very interest of the ASEAN leaders, and they need to show their leadership to the people of ASEAN across the region, that they are there for the people, for the security and stability of the region, but not for the military junta, and they must prove it now.
Thank you very much, Omar. Ubola Tint, would you like to reply to that also?
Well, Omar's answer is to completely cover the whole picture of Burma today. I only thing I need to add up is that, if you look at the ethnic organization, in the past, they are fighting for their liberation, their self-determination, for their only race and their own people. But now they are in front line against the military suppression, not only for themselves, but also for the whole nation. They are in front line of against the end of the military dictatorship in Burma. They are very committed hand to hand with the NUG, CRPH, as well as NUCC. You know, those things are very outstanding and very credible achievement that Spring Revolution reaching at the stage, so that we confident ourselves. That is Myanmar we want to be at this stage. Only thing we need is fully cooperation from the regional association as well as international community to we can foster this process faster than ever.
We have another question from the media. Peder Gustafsson from Swedish National Radio is asking, how important is it that ASEAN agrees on how to treat the junta from a future geopolitical perspective in the region? I suppose that this is about the role of China and the United States and the sort of the way that the big powers relate to Southeast Asia as a sort of strategically important region. Would you like to, who would like to address this? Debbie, would you like to take this up?
Actually, in this picture, everyone's talking about what about China? And this is part of an ongoing game, diplomatic game on any issue regarding Burma, Myanmar in the past, that ASEAN leaders would say, oh, it's we can't do anything because, you know, really it doesn't matter. It's all about China. And then China will say, oh, we'll do whatever, we'll follow ASEAN's lead. So everyone's pushing the buck to each other. But I think it's very important to understand, if you're looking at security issues and geopolitical issues, that China cannot afford an intensified dry season offensive in the north, because it's already dealing with the COVID pandemic. It cannot afford this threat to regional human security, and neither can ASEAN. And also, ironically, China has been keeping in touch with the NLD and other stakeholders, but ASEAN has not. If ASEAN is saying they want dialogue between the junta and all the stakeholders in order to effect some kind of breakthrough, then ASEAN has to take the lead and engage officially with the NUG, because the NUG represents the 76% of elected MPs and a whole diversity of ethnic leaders and communities. So if ASEAN doesn't show that example, why should we expect the military regime to do so? At this point, ASEAN, China, everybody has to actually weigh in and apply more pressure on the junta. It's very clear when Min Aung Hlaing came to Jakarta and said yes, okay to the 5-point consensus, he had no intention of following it. And he's the biggest block. At this point, it's Min Aung Hlaing's personal ambition and his greed that is holding back the junta, holding back ASEAN, holding back China, and basically posing a threat to the entire region. So pressure is important because the rest of the junta needs to understand Min Aung Hlaing is their biggest liability and their biggest block to any way of redeeming this situation.
Thank you very much, Debbie. There have been quite a few questions about this question of dialogue between the NUG and the SAC Tatmadaw military, because this is a part of the ASEAN roadmap to establish peace. And I think it's important, actually, Ambassador Ubo, that you speak about this. Is the NUG ready to dialogue with the SAC?
First point I would like to make is that since the beginning, because of the today NUG, as well as it is, election ownership is the National League for Democracy led by Aung San Suu Kyi. Since the inception, the NLD position is that to solve the political problem by political means. And in our either, we also push up our agenda is for the tripartite dialogue. All these genuine representatives of ethnic group, military, and all these democratic movement representative join together and equally, have a dialogue and find the most sustainable solution for the country. But all these positive approach has been rejected or denied by the military. So positive approach of NLD, positive approach of any other, democratic forces, including ourselves in the past, National Coalition Government of the Union of Burma. Our agenda has been, our call for the tripartite dialogue has been adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1994. That's the best solution for future Burma to gain the restoration of democracy and sustainability development in Myanmar. So that what I'm trying to say is that we would like to see the most sustainable way of, engaging mutual respect and engaging for the nation building in peaceful way. But the military always rejected all the positive mindset and effort of the democratic leadership or ethnic leadership in the past. And the last several months, they are becoming worsen that not only rejecting, but also becoming real terrorist organization in the nation, and they are sponsoring the state terrorism, and they are root of the cause. So that at this point, every people at this point, they are facing with the majority of Myanmar population resisting them, against them. So that, but we, the leaders of the elected legitimate representative of people, the government, they will not outrightly rejecting all these international and regional cooperation to find a sustainable solution. We are not rejecting any possibility.
Right.
But at the same time, the regional community or leadership and international community have to really understand what is really suffering and firm stand of the Burmese people, as Oma mentioned in her statement, that what is the real desire of the Burmese population. Without pay attention and serious listening to the voice of the Burmese people, no ASEAN, but also international community
Right.
will not find a sustainable solution for
Yeah,
Burma.
I think another important point to bring to in answering that question is who does the dialogue, given that the top elected officials with whom the dialogue could take place are in jail. They've been detained. So I think that's a serious problem when people are asking for dialogue between the NUG and the junta. We have it's already 11:01 Bangkok time, so we're going a bit over time. But I would like to ask one more question and then concluding remarks. Actually, two more questions. They're from Mei Wong from Channel News Asia, and her questions are to Bola Tint, but I'm sure that we could hear from other participants as well by way of concluding remarks. The questions are, you said NUG has written to ASEAN and received no response. Have you been reaching out to individual ASEAN member states? Who are they? And how receptive have they been to you? And then the second question is, you asked ASEAN to choose between working with NUG or the failed military coup, but ASEAN has always resisted choosing sides. What concrete steps can be taken beyond forcing ASEAN to pick sides or to quote unquote act decisively as said? Thank you very much.
Well, the first point I would like to make is clear that I've been appointed on the 24th October. So I'm sitting at this, in the United States at this point. And as I said before, I have no concrete response from the ASEAN as a whole leadership response, how we can engage. dialogue with the ASEAN leadership or any members of. But we are, at the same time, we are sending all the member foreign ministry the appointment of ASEAN ambassador. So by myself, I will try to reach out to those, especially who showing the very willingness to work with the NUG as well as the Spring Revolution. We are sending all member state foreign ministry that my appointment is showing that NUG readiness to work with the ASEAN, so that we will go step by step. But at the same time, second part of the question is that, what the concrete step ASEAN should be taking is that it is obvious that, if they cannot work with that, they have to, for the time being, they must be able to address themselves. What will be, okay, what is the next step for ASEAN is depend upon this summit. They have to show that they are ready to depart from the status quo, and they become to transform into a real respectable or real reliable regional association, addressing all these crises in the region professionally or effectively. So we expected that, but it will depend upon this first step of the summit decision. We're going to wait and see. Not long, but after that, we will use our opportunity to talk with ASEAN dialogue partners internationally, United Nations, as well as other United States and European Parliament or European members, European Union members, so that if ASEAN is not, maintaining its credibility or responsibility effectively, we have to go with other dialogue partner who can, who has been working positively with ASEAN leadership, but when they are focused on ASEAN leadership to do their job, if ASEAN fail to do their job, we will work with whoever willing to work with our movement as well as NUG as a legitimate government of Myanmar, so that we are not departing from ASEAN. We want to be the constructive member of the ASEAN society and ASEAN member. But if ASEAN leadership is so rejected, we will go anywhere we can attain what Myanmar people desire to receive. So that ASEAN must be decisive, and we will be actively working with ASEAN. If they are not, we will pay attention more. As Debbie Stoddard said, now even the biggest regional player, China itself, has been showing changing of their way of communicating. They already formally requested to NLD that to establish party-to-party relation with China. So it is very significant step Chinese authority has been taking by means of party-to-party relation. It says, ASEAN leadership should be realized that. So if they are late to make response as usual, the other direction will be, Myanmar will be out of the, way of the ASEAN area to become like they want to be effective, constructive partner. But if ASEAN leadership fail to welcome or embrace the willingness of the Myanmar people and their legitimate government, the government itself will find the other way around to have, achievement our own, destination. So that we want ASEAN leadership to be decisive and to use their decisiveness for the betterment of not only able to find the solution in Myanmar, but also the whole region as well.
Thank you very much, Ubol.
Veronica, can I quickly respond?
Yes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask everybody, because it's we're a bit over time, to ask everyone to provide their contribution to answering that question, but also this will be their concluding remarks. Thank you, Charles. Please go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Veronica. Let me respond to Amir Wong's question. I think first, the Malaysian Foreign Minister has said quite openly that he is willing to meet NUG. So this is a breakthrough. And I hope the other foreign ministers, I'm sure Indonesia will do the same thing. I hope Singapore and Philippines will follow suit. Number two, it is wrong to say that ASEAN has not taken sides. ASEAN has taken a side, and its side is actually with Myanmar. We can see that the position is quite clear vis-a-vis Myanmar. What we are saying is it's the wrong decision, it's the wrong choice, and it's the wrong side. And ASEAN needs to wake up very soon to realize that that the problem in Myanmar is going to turn into a regional, has got all the elements of turning into a regional problem. One, flow of refugees. Number two, arms and drugs trafficking. Number three, because there's a potential for security problems to emerge, and also the spread of COVID, when refugees move from Myanmar to other places, and if they are COVID positive, they're going to bring it to other countries as well. So before it turns into an ASEAN nightmare, I think ASEAN governments really have to buck up and make an important decision in this meeting by acknowledging that NUG exists, and ASEAN will start the process of negotiating with NUG. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Debbie and Omar, did you want to make your concluding remarks as well? Not for Debbie. Go ahead, Omar.
Thank you. I must join Charles in your point, Charles, that you're very right. The ASEAN has taken side with the Myanmar military for a long time, in fact. I also want to respond to Mei Wang's, or I forgot who asked, no, not Mei Wang, sorry, on the whole like a dialogue issue thing. You see, like, we have learned from our experience that no dialogue can be genuine or achievable unless all sides have equal leverage. No democratic transition can be genuine and successful at gunpoint. Past 10 years, Myanmar's democratic opposition movement was pushed by many actors from international and regional to engage in dialogue with this military in that very expensive peace process, very expensive peace industry, with all the peace donors from Norway and, I don't want to name all, but Japan, for example, and the EU. But see what happened. We past 9 months, it should be a wake-up call to all of us that this military is not for dialogue. And I think it's very important also, we have to also come to realize and come together and join force in our common common aspiration and belief in humanity, because the current crimes of the military, the atrocity crimes in the past 9 months, are able only because this military was off the hook. They were left without being held to account for the past crimes that they committed against the Rohingya community in 2007, the genocide, and also the crimes against humanity and war crimes against other ethnic communities, the Karen and the Kachin and the Mon and the Korani. So now, as I said, there are 2 vicious operations, military clearance operations are targeted to the Chin community and also the Burma majority population community in Upper Burma, Upper Myanmar, where the violence, where the resistance against this military is so strong. And see, we are going to be seeing another wave of atrocities. So my point here is, we have to really, Myanmar is perhaps the strongest case to really learn of how such military, if we leave them alone like that and let them further enjoy their impunity, they are the threat to the humanity at large, not only in the ASEAN region, but across. So I think it's, that's the very reason, if we are to think about the dialogue, we have to tell the ASEAN and the rest of the world, the United Nations, that they are backing the 5 points ASEAN consensus, right? Let's make sure that this junta stop all of these violent attacks against the Myanmar people first. Let's make sure that this junta release Daw San Suu Kyi, President Wu Win-Myint, and all other detainees from the last 9 months. And let's make sure this military junta also stop all the violence attacks day in and day out every day. Only then, this has to be the first minimum benchmark of what kind of whatever the dialogue that we want to see in the coming time. But that has to be the first benchmark that the ASEAN and international community and the UN must guarantee for the people of Myanmar. Otherwise, I don't see a point of a dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Omar. Such strong, compelling words on behalf of the people. And there are millions of them in Myanmar who are suffering this terrible violence every day, every hour even. You just need to, follow the news to see, if you will look for it, even though the mainstream news is not having it. You can also follow, I think Asean Burma does a coup watch. And if you look at that, you can see how the violent attacks are piling up more and more frequently every day, the longer that this goes on. So the need is really very urgent. I think we'll wrap it up. I think it feels like there's nothing more that needs to be said after what Omar said, and for that to rest in people's minds. We will continue to keep you up to date here. If you need any more information, we can put you in touch with our panelists through the ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights. And we thank you very much for attending this conference. And thank you very much to our panelists, Charles Santiago, Ubo Latint, Omar, and honored guest, Debbie. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.